Alright guys, this is a paper test video and also a review of our papers in ThreadNPrints. These papers are the papers that we use in our notebooks, and we just want to demonstrate to you how our paper works. And to do that, we are also going to be comparing the paper with Tomoe River paper, which is in Hobonichi. Now first up is our new Japanese paper. So you guys might be more familiar with our smooth paper, but we have a new Japanese paper in store, so I'm just going to show you. So this is more similar to the Tomoe River paper, so that's why I'm comparing them side by side. So for the Japanese paper, it have a longer drying time, but it's still about the same as Hobonichi. Sometimes it is slower and sometimes it is faster, so it's about there. I think it's because it is made for fountain pen. So if you're a fountain pen user, this Japanese paper would be a much better option because it is very smooth, and you'll see that later. So for the ink pen, it takes some time to dry, and this Uniball eye pen is an even heavier, thicker ink pen. So likewise, it will take even longer, but as you can see, it takes about the same time on the Tomoe River paper as well. So and the Pilot felt tip pen is, I'm not sure whether it's a felt tip, it's something like a brushy kind, I'm not sure, but it's just really thick. And this kind of pen, I think if you want to use this on your planner, don't get the Japanese paper because it's very hard to dry. It takes a very long time to dry. So I would say stay away from this kind of pen if you use this Japanese paper. As you can see, it takes a long time to dry on the Tomoe River paper as well. Then after that, we have the Tombow brush swatches and also the Stabilo highlighter pens. So Stabilo highlighters, and flip over, there is no bleed through on both, but then there is a lesser ghosting on the Japanese paper because it is thicker than the Tomoe River paper. So next up, we have the Uni Pin, which is sort of like a kind of pen for you to draw and sketch, and it will not smudge. Then after that, we have the Sharpie permanent marker. Most papers will definitely bleed through if you use a permanent marker. As you can see, the Tomoe River paper bleed through as well, but then the Japanese paper is very resilient, as you can see later when we turn it around. So here we go, even much hardcore with this red color permanent marker, like very thick permanent marker. So I'm just rubbing through those Faber-Castell and Uniball just to show you that it eventually dries, although it takes some time. Okay, now the flip through, and as you can see, the Japanese paper, there is ghosting, but definitely no bleed through, and there is bleed through on the Tomoe River paper. Well, that being said, you don't usually use permanent marker on planners, so that is just to show you how thick or how resilient that paper is. Alright, so next up we have the Battle of the Fountain pens. Alright, Platinum 377 6th Century in F nib. So this is a fine nib pen, and yes, there is drying time. It takes a while to dry, but it dry relatively quick. Then after that, we have a Platinum Preppy fine nib as well, but for some reason this nib is better than the Platinum Century. So as you can see, it's thicker, so obviously it takes longer time to dry. Most papers that are good for fountain pen they usually take longer time to dry. So yeah, so you can see it still smudges, and it's much more on the Tomoe River paper. For some reason it takes longer time to dry for the fountain pen ink, but then for the ink gel pen, I think the Japanese paper might take a slightly longer time than the Tomoe River paper. Alright, with the broad nib here, actually you can see color variation in both papers. So for good paper, for fountain pen, there you can see the color variation on the ink. So it proves that this both paper are good for fountain pens. That's what I think. I'm not an expert, but yeah. So flip over, there is no bleed through at all. So that is the Japanese paper. Now we'll just go in with color pencil, just so you can see whether this is good for sketching. So you can still use the both of them to sketch. Alright, just to show you the grids on the paper. Okay, next up we have watercolor. Before, I've never actually used watercolor on the Japanese paper, but now because I think that it will never ever work because it takes such a long time for other inks to dry. But surprisingly, although it takes some time to dry, it held up the best among all the other papers for watercolor. Okay, so just a quick recap between the Japanese paper and the Tomoe River paper, which one to choose and which one should you go for. So Japanese paper is much thicker than the Tomoe River paper. So if you want to have like many pages in a book, with the Japanese paper it will be much thicker than if you had the Tomoe River paper. So people appreciate the Tomoe River paper because it is thin and it is resilient. So it just depends on what you want, but ghosting is a problem. So if you really hate ghosting, then probably Tomoe River paper is not for you, because although it doesn't bleed through, there's a lot of ghosting, so you go with the Japanese paper. But if you want many pages and you want it compact and nice, then go with the Tomoe River paper. Alright, moving on to the paper test of the textured paper and the smooth paper. So firstly, we have the ballpoint pen, Papermate Inkjoy. There's no problem with that. Then after that, we have the ink pen Faber-Castell. Still no problem. There's no problem with dry time between these two paper at all. As you can see, they are already dried. Okay, next one, Unibo I. Now, this pen and also the next one, which is Pilot Felt Tip, the textured paper have slight feathering, but a smooth paper doesn't have any feathering at all, because the smooth paper is also suitable for fountain pen, so it doesn't feather. Alright, next up we use Tombow colors and Tombow swatches and also highlighters. I just want to show you that although we swatch it a few times, there is still no bleed through for the Tombow brushes. As for the Stabilo highlighter, because the color is pigmented, if you press a little longer, there might be a slight bleed through. Alright, moving on to Unipin, which is the non-smudge pen, and also the Sharpie permanent marker. After that, we also have the Big Boy, the full out permanent marker, the red swatch. This is just to show you how thick the paper is, how resilient it is, and also comparing it to our Japanese paper, which there's no bleed through at all. So both of this paper has bleed through as well, just that there is just a slight little bit bleed through on the smooth paper, but there's ghosting on both paper. Alright, so moving on to fountain pen. There is no feathering for the Platinum Century nib on the textured paper. Definitely no feathering on smooth paper, because this is a very fine nib. Then moving on to the Platinum Preppy fine nib. This is a slightly wetter nib, so there is a little bit of feathering on the textured paper. I can see just a very minimal bit, but there still is a little bit. Then as for the TWSBI broad nib, surprisingly the textured paper doesn't have feathering at all. I'm not sure why it feathers for the platinum preppy but not the broader TWSBI nib. Both paper doesn't have any bleed through for fountain pens, and I've forgotten to turn around this smooth paper, but there is no bleed through. I'll turn it around later on. Okay, as for then after that I use some color pencil and also watercolor just to show you that you can put watercolor on it. It does dry, but both paper does get wrinkly. The paper that stands up to watercolor the most is our Japanese paper, and here I'll end up putting more watercolor on the Japanese paper, and then I waited for them to dry. Turns out that the textured paper is the most crinkly. Smooth paper, there is a crinkle but not that much, but then the Japanese paper doesn't crinkle as much. So that's the verdict if you want to use watercolor for the papers. Now in terms of fountain pen, I would say the Japanese paper is the best out of all these three paper, because it does have variation in color and there's no feathering at all. The smooth paper does not feather, but you lost the variation in color of your ink if that's what you want.